Tema prezentării este Artificial Intelligence in Warfare, AI Success in the Ukraine War. Doamnelor și domnilor, îl invit pe scenă pe domnul Jay Tuck.
They give me very little time. I offered two different subjects today. One of them is the one you're going to hear, warfare. That's nasty.
I chose it.
You chose it. Wow, okay. A lot of people like the subject, and there's very interesting stuff to tell. I will hurry to try to get it all in. The second subject I offer was how artificial intelligence saves lives, millions of lives, every day. Both subjects are talking about the here and now. These are not visions of things that may happen in the future someday, but these are technologies that are involved right now. I put them in my book. It came out in German. If your German is not so good, you can always look it up in Chinese, okay? So I was in Ukraine. It was a very sad visit. The poor people who were living there suffer very, very much. But it's the Russians who are suffering more because the Russians are losing the war, as I'm sure you know. And I'm going to start with Hollywood. We should have some sound now, please. This is Hollywood. I'm sure you know this guy. His name is Tom Cruise. He's one of the most famous American actors. And he made a movie called Top Gun, and then he made another movie called Top Gun 2. It's a film about the best pilots in the world. And Hollywood directors, they like to think that the best pilots in the world are us, human beings. But it's not true. The best pilots in the world are machines, are robots. And if you ever ask me, when is AI going to take over, surpass human beings, it has. In many, many, many areas, and one of them is in the military. If you look in the cockpit of this F-16 fighter jet, you will see that there's not a pilot, no Tom Cruise in it. It's a robot in there. And the reason is that human pilots, they need all of this stuff. They need oxygen, and they need cabin pressure, and they need ejection seats. It costs a lot of money, and you risk human lives. The machine, it needs none of that. It works 365 days a year. It never has a fight with his wife and gets all messed up. No vacations, no unions, just keeps going, and he's faster and better than we are, much better than we are. So I'm going to go into the history of AI in warfare. Speaking of history, that was me a long time ago. Gulf War I. I saw a lot of combat in Gulf War I, and I saw a lot of the weapons systems that are being used today in Ukraine. Many, they write in the newspapers, are brand new. But the weapon of choice in that war was a cruise missile, and that was in a position to fly 500 miles over the land, terrain hugging between the valleys, and they would hit the 17th floor of a skyscraper and kill everybody. Very, very effective weapons. I came back to the war 10 years later. I was in the Mediterranean. That's the USS Truman, a warship. They weren't using the cruise missiles that much. Why? Because they're so expensive. One cruise missile costs $2.6 million, one. So they switched to these. These are dumb weapons. These are stupid weapons. They're called fall bombs. They call them that because they let them fall out of the airplane, hits the ground, goes boom. They only cost $5,000 or $6,000, peanuts. But if you put this machine from Boeing, you screw that onto the bomb, then you can steer it in just like a cruise missile in the final stages. Hit your target. You've saved a lot of money. And they just started sending J-bombs. The Ukraine government wanted to have them very recently. The first one, the J-bombs, got to the Ukraine 3 weeks ago, so they're brand new. And now, of course, the weapon of choice is the drone. This is a Reaper drone. You may have read that a U.S. drone was shot down over the Black Sea by the Russians. That was this kind. And you will not see many photographs of journalists standing next to this top secret weapon. We spent several days there. We interviewed the pilots, we interviewed the designers, and all of that. And when we were in Kuwait, they were shooting at us with missiles, Iraqi missiles. And we were protected by the Patriots. The missile came in, they saw it on the radar, and they went boom, boom, shot off 2 Patriots. They always hit it, and broke the weapons. Patriots saved lives, and now they're starting to deliver Patriots to Ukraine. Now this really makes Vladimir Putin angry, because they're getting on the other side all these sexy, famous, hot weapons, and the Russians don't have weapons like that. And this is a super weapon they have. It's not very special. It's sort of like an old tank, but Putin loves it because of the name. His industry people call this Terminator. He says, that's nice, that'll scare the Americans, a Terminator tank. And he put it on the battlefield a little too early. It's not quite finished yet. And the Ukrainians discovered it with a drone. That was the first Terminator in Ukraine. It didn't do very much terminating because the Ukrainian missiles using AI, they found it, and the drones discover the tanks, and then they radio the position 300 kilometers away to the HIMARS, to the precision artillery. They shoot off a rocket, and that's what happens. They hit their targets with the help of AI. This is something that President Barack Obama wanted, because sometimes these bombs, they hit people, and there are people at a wedding nearby, and innocent people who got killed. So Obama wanted a weapon that didn't kill so many people. It was limited to the place where it hit. And this is what they came up with. It's called the secret killer. Like a Nina. It hit an ISIS guy that used to be a car. No explosions. It just chops it up with a knife. And this is very important. When I was visiting the Rome, the drone pilots' places, they were having fistfights with each other, because the new pilots, they didn't fly like Tom Cruise up in the deep blue skies. The new pilots sat on a couch and had a joystick. The PlayStation generation. These are the pilots the U.S. Air Force wants. These are the pilots they now hire. And when they get hired, they get wings, just like the real pilots. But the real pilots, they're really angry. All these kids are coming in from high school, excellent drone pilots, never been in an airplane, don't know how to fly, and they get these wings, which are very prestigious. And this is jumping ahead a little bit. This is a new weapon. You'll notice this is a cartoon. It's an animation. It's not by Steven Spielberg or Walt Disney. No, this animation is made by the United States Air Force, an official U.S. Air Force video of a planned system called micro-drones. And these microphones, that's a bad guy. You see, they identify the bad guy on the camera, and then they go in and kill him. And they're very, very effective. They're hard to shoot down. And now, these weapons are in service in Ukraine. You won't see any video. You won't see any photographs. They go up behind a sniper and do this. They are doing that to snipers, to Russian snipers in the Ukraine. There's a cruiser, a very, very beautiful, fancy, modern cruiser at in the Black Sea. It's the flagship of the Russian Navy in the Black Sea, and it's called the Moskva. And this thing is so snazzy, Putin loves it. He invited CNN and the BBC to come in and film him steering this boat, which is really nice. It took the Ukrainians 3 days, and then they sank it. It is now in the bottom of the Black Sea. That was their flagship production. And then the other tank I showed you that just blew up was called Terminator. And they tried to scare us with their press announcements of the super new Terminator tank. And they blew it up in a matter of days. When the Russians came across the border and to invade, they expected it to be a piece of cake. They expected to be able to take the Ukraine in 3 or 4 days, maybe a week, to take over. And what happened was they came over and 10,000 Russian tanks were destroyed, basically by one weapon system called Javelin. You see, normally tank defense is based on protecting the side of the tank. They have what they call reactive explosives. That means you come and hit it with a rocket, and it has explosives, and it explodes back, and the two explosions neutralize each other. So that was a good protection for the Russian tanks until Javelin came along. Javelin is, like I say, it's a smart weapon, and it approaches not from the side, it goes up real high, and you know the law of physics, what goes up must come down. It comes down, and it hits the tanks on the top, where there's almost no armor. And the result is the streets of Ukraine are full of these Russian tanks that are all been exploded and are rusting. And they're even exporting them now to show to other countries how poor the Russian military is. They take these burned out tank racks, and in Berlin they've parked one of those in front of the Russian embassy. Now the Russian ambassador does not like that very much. He protested, but they left it there as a sign of how weak their weapon systems are. And they are just very simply having huge problems getting weapons that face up to the AI weapons of today. Okay, yeah, here you are. That's the Javelin. It's a shoulder-based weapon system. It's very easy. One infantryman, or person, as you have to say today to be politically correct, one infantry person carries it on his shoulder, and he shoots off this rocket, and it goes straight at the target, and at the final moment it shoots up in the air and comes down, and it blows the turret. The turret is the top of the tank. Blows it right off. Everyone in there is killed. And around Bakhmut, the Russian soldiers were losing 850 soldiers a day fighting this kind of weaponry. How many people here are worried about Mr. Putin? Anybody here in the room worried about Mr. Putin? A couple of you. Well, I have good news for you. If I'm right, the war will be over between 2 and 6 weeks. It will be ended. The Ukrainians will have retaken Crimea, and Putin will no longer be in office. And I have based my latest book on this prediction, so wish me luck. I hope that all works out. In Europe, people are always surprised. What? The war will be over? The Russians are going to lose that soon? But if you ask the Ukrainians, soldiers, generals, taxi drivers, whoever, they all say, yeah, it'll be over. We'll finish them off. And it really looks like they will. They've gotten all these modern tanks from the West, the Leopard 2s from Germany, and the Abrams tanks from USA, and so many other weapons. And they have developed their own AI system. We're here to talk about AI, which morphs diverse targeting systems. For example, you may have a video coming in live from a battlefield that shows a couple of Russian tanks, and they will combine that video with people's telephone videos, with satellite pictures, with airplane pictures. We'll morph them all together into one target video and be able to give a very, very precise location where the target is. And then they call in the artillery, the HIMARS, 300 kilometers away, and they land between 2 and 3 meters away from target. It's just amazing, amazing weaponry. And this morphing system is an AI development done by the Ukrainians, who are obviously very much vested in this terrible war. Okay, that's the end of that. So why don't we move to questions? I'm sure you've got lots of good questions. All questions are welcome, especially critical ones. Thank you.
Jay Tuck, ladies and gentlemen.